My name is Maya. I am 20 years old. I used to think love was something you earned, not something you were given. In my house, applause never followed my victories. It followed silence. I brought home trophies. They asked why I wasn't first in everything. I scored 92. They asked about the missing 8. I stayed up nights building something I believed in. They told me to stop dreaming and start being realistic. My name is Maya. I'm 20 years old, and for most of my life, I felt invisible in my own home. My parents didn't hate me. That would have been easier. They just dismissed me. Every achievement I carried to them like a fragile glass sculpture was dropped with a single sentence. You could have done better. But here's what they didn't know. While they were busy measuring my worth by my mistakes, the world was quietly watching. While they compared me to cousins, neighbors, and children of their friends, someone else saw something different. Not my flaws, my fire. And the night everything changed. It didn't happen in my living room. It happened under lights so bright they burned. In front of cameras. In front of thousands. In front of the same people who once whispered that I wasn't enough. My parents ignored my success until the spotlight found me. And when it did, they couldn't look away anymore. I grew up in a house where love sounded like correction. Not loud, not cruel, not violent. Just constant. Like a dripping tap that never lets you sleep. Every achievement I carried home felt like fragile glass in my hands. And every time, it shattered against the same wall of expectation. I remember being 16. Running through the gate with my result sheet pressed against my chest. Second position in class. Out of 120 students. My heart was beating so fast I could barely breathe. I thought this was the day. The day they would finally look at me. The way other parents looked at their daughters. With pride. With softness. My mother took the paper from my hand and adjusted her glasses. Her eyes moved across the numbers. "Who came first?" she asked. Just like that. One sentence. One question that erased everything I had done. I told her the name. She nodded slowly, like a judge delivering a quiet sentence. "You need to focus more. Second means someone was better." That evening, I learned something important. Achievement wasn't about how far I had come. It was about how far I had not. My father was quieter. He never criticized directly. He just withdrew. When I tried to explain how hard the exams were, how proud I felt, he scrolled on his phone and said, "Good. Now maintain it. Maintain it." As if I were a machine programmed to produce numbers. As if I didn't stay up until 2 a.m, fighting sleep and doubt. I wasn't a bad daughter. I didn't argue. I didn't break rules. I studied. I helped at home. I respected them. But somehow, I was always lacking something invisible. If I was confident, I was called stubborn. If I was emotional, I was told I was weak. If I dreamed big, I was reminded to be realistic. My cousins became measuring tapes. Look at her discipline. Look at his focus. Why? Can't you be more like them? Every comparison carved something out of me, slowly, quietly. Began shrinking my excitement before I brought it home. If I won something, I downplayed it. If someone praised me, I brushed it off. It was safer that way, because hope hurt more than disappointment. At night, when the house went silent and the lights were off, I would sit by my window with my laptop. That was the only place I felt seen. I loved storytelling. I loved speaking. I loved building ideas from nothing. I started creating short videos about confidence, ambition, self-growth. I didn't tell anyone. I posted them quietly online. At first, almost no one watched. 12 views, then 30, then 100. I remember the first comment from a stranger. "You speak with so much clarity." I stared at that. Sentence for 5 minutes. Clarity. No, one had ever used that word for me before. Another comment said, "Your voice is powerful." Powerful. At home, my voice felt like background noise. But here, in this invisible world, people were listening. I started posting consistently. Every night after finishing my studies, I worked on scripts. I recorded in whispers so no one would hear me. I edited under a blanket sometimes, afraid the light would expose my secret. Months passed. My followers grew. 1,000, 5,000, 10,000. Strangers shared my videos. They messaged me saying I inspired them. Inspired. The same girl who was constantly reminded she wasn't enough was inspiring others. The irony was almost painful. One evening, gathering courage I didn't fully feel, I told my mother I was building something online. She didn't even look up from the kitchen counter. Social media is not a career, Maya. Focus on real success. Real success. As if what I was creating wasn't real because it didn't fit inside their definition. My father added, "These distractions will ruin your future. Distraction. That word echoed in my chest long after the conversation ended. I went to my room that night and stared at my reflection. Was I distracted? Or was I building something they simply couldn't see? I stopped telling them about anything that mattered to me. It became easier that way. At dinner, I nodded when they discussed competitive exams. I agreed when they spoke about stability and safe jobs. Meanwhile, my online presence kept growing. Brands began reaching out. Small collaborations at first, then bigger ones. I earned my first payment from a sponsored post. I held the money in my hand and felt something shift inside me. It wasn't about the amount. It was about proof. Proof that my voice had value. But even then, I said nothing. Because I knew how it would go. It would be minimized, questioned, compared. So I built quietly, like a storm forming beyond the horizon. My 20th birthday passed without celebration. Just a small cake, polite wishes, and a reminder from my father that adulthood meant responsibility. I smiled. They had no idea how responsible I had already become. They didn't know about the nights I cried silently, then wiped my face and recorded anyway. They didn't know about the rejection emails I received and how I used them as fuel. They only saw what I lacked, not what I was building. And somewhere deep inside, a new feeling began replacing sadness. Not anger exactly, not yet. It was determination. Cold, focused, steady. If they refused to see my success. While it was growing, then one day it would grow too large to ignore. I didn't want revenge through shouting or rebellion. I wanted something quieter. I wanted undeniable proof. I wanted a moment so bright that even their criticism would be forced to blink. I didn't know when that moment would come. But I felt it approaching, like the calm before something powerful. And for the first time in my life, I stopped trying to earn their approval. I decided to earn my own. The email arrived at 2:17 a.m. I remember the time because I had just finished editing a video and my eyes were burning from staring at the screen. I almost didn't open it. The subject line looked formal, almost unreal. Official invitation, National Startup Spotlight. For a second, I thought it was spam. Something about it felt too big, too impossible. But when I clicked, my breath caught in my throat. They had been tracking emerging digital creators with business potential. They had reviewed my content, my engagement, my pitch clips, and they wanted me on their televised entrepreneurship competition, live stage. National broadcast, investors, audience, media coverage. I read the message 3 times before it felt real. My hands started shaking. This wasn't another online milestone. This was visibility at a level I had never imagined. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. For years, I had been told to be realistic, to lower my expectations, to focus on secure paths. And now something extraordinary was knocking at my door. I wanted to run to my parents' room and tell them. I wanted to say, look at what I've built. But the memory of every dismissed achievement stopped me. I could already hear it. Television is temporary. Don't get distracted. Focus on exams. So I closed the door to my room, instead, quietly. I filled out the confirmation form before I could talk myself out of it. The deadline was 48 hours. I submitted in 5 minutes. Once I hit send, a strange calm washed over me. There was no applause. No one in the house even knew my life had just shifted. The next week was a blur. The producers sent guidelines. I needed to prepare a 5-minute pitch for my digital media startup idea, not just content creation. A full scalable platform for youth-driven storytelling and personal branding education. I wasn't just showing up as a girl with videos. I was stepping onto that stage as a founder. Every night after dinner, I locked my door and practiced. I recorded myself speaking and played it back. I analyzed my tone, my pauses, my eye contact. I memorized statistics about digital growth, audience psychology, brand strategy. During the day, I acted normal. I attended classes. I helped my mother in the kitchen. I listened to my father talk about job applications. Meanwhile, I was preparing for the biggest opportunity of my life. One evening at dinner, my father said, "You should start applying for internships. Time is running." I swallowed and nodded. Time is running, I thought, just not in the way you think. The production team called me for a virtual briefing. When I saw the show logo on the screen, my stomach flipped. This was real. They explained the format, 4 judges, live audience, on-air voting segment. It felt overwhelming. After the call ended, I sat in silence for a long time. Fear crept in slowly. What if I fail publicly? What if I freeze? What if my parents see me embarrass myself on national television? That night I didn't sleep. But somewhere between fear and doubt, something else surfaced. A quiet voice inside me said, Even if you fail, it will be your failure, not one assigned to you. And that thought felt powerful. The day my travel tickets arrived in my inbox, I printed them secretly at a shop near my college. I told my parents I had a college workshop in another city. It wasn't entirely a lie. It was education, just not the kind they respected. The morning I left, my mother reminded me to stay focused and not waste time. I almost laughed at the irony. If only she knew how focused I truly was. The city felt bigger when I arrived, louder, faster. The production team picked us up and drove us to a hotel where the other participants were staying. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who were like me. Dreamers, builders, risk-takers. No one laughed at ambition here. No one called it unrealistic. We shared ideas late into the night. I didn't feel small. I didn't feel compared. I felt equal. The rehearsal day was intense. Standing on that stage for the first time made my knees weak. The lights were blinding even without the audience. I imagined millions watching from home. My chest tightened. But then I remembered every night I had recorded alone in my room. If I could speak to a camera in the dark, I could speak under lights. I practiced my opening line again and again. My name is Maya. I'm 20 years old. And I believe young voices deserve platforms, not permission. Each time I said it, I felt stronger. On the final night before the live show, I stood by the hotel window looking at the city lights. Somewhere miles away, my parents were probably sitting in the living room, unaware that tomorrow their daughter would step into a space they had never imagined for her. A part of me wished they would somehow discover it by accident, flip through channels and see my face. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted acknowledgement. Still, I reminded myself of something important. I wasn't doing this to prove them wrong. I was doing it to prove myself right. The morning of the show, makeup artists buzzed around us. Cameras moved through hallways. Producers counted down minutes. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would echo through the microphone. As I waited backstage, I closed my eyes. I saw 16-year-old me holding that result sheet. I saw 19-year-old me reading comments from strangers at midnight. I saw every quiet moment of doubt and determination, and I whispered to myself, "This is yours." When they called my name, I stepped forward into the light, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't asking to be seen. I simply was. The first thing I remember after finishing my pitch was silence. Not the uncomfortable kind, the heavy kind. The kind that sits in the air right before something explodes. I stood there under the lights, hands steady at my sides, heart pounding so loudly I thought the microphone would catch it. For years I had imagined speaking without being interrupted, without being corrected, without being compared. And now I had 5 full minutes where no one stopped me. No one dismissed me. I had taken up space. Fully. Completely. Then the applause came. It wasn't polite. It wasn't forced. It was loud. Real. It rolled toward me like a wave, and for a second I just stood there, absorbing it. I didn't bow. I didn't cry. I just let myself feel it. One of the judges leaned forward. "Maya," he said, studying me carefully, "you speak with clarity and conviction. That's rare at 20. Clarity. The same word a stranger once used in a comment at midnight. But this time, it echoed across a national stage. Another judge asked about scalability. I answered without hesitation. I had memorized every number, every projection, every weakness in my plan. They questioned. I responded, not defensively, confidently. I wasn't there as a hopeful girl chasing validation. I was there as a founder defending her vision. The final judge smiled slightly. "You don't just want investment," she said. "You want impact," I nodded. "Yes, and I'm prepared to build it." When the negotiation segment began, my hands trembled for the first time. Offers were discussed. Equity percentages floated in the air like fragile glass. My mind calculated quickly. Risk versus control. Exposure versus ownership. This wasn't a classroom exercise. This was real. After a tense exchange, one of the judges made an offer that aligned with my long-term vision. Fair equity. Strategic mentorship. National exposure. My throat tightened as I answered. "I accept." The audience erupted again. The deal was sealed. In that moment, I felt something shift inside me. Not pride exactly. Not relief. It was recognition. I had built something from the quiet corners of my room, and now it had a place in the world. Backstage, the other contestants hugged me. Producers congratulated me. Someone adjusted my microphone while telling me my segment was trending online. Trending. The word felt distant, unreal. My phone had been taken before the show, but as soon as they returned it, it began vibrating nonstop. Notifications flooded the screen. Messages from strangers, followers doubling by the minute, clips of my pitch already circulating, my name typed again and again by people I had never met. I sat down in a quiet corner backstage and finally allowed myself to breathe. This was the moment I had imagined during every lonely night. Not for fame, not for revenge, but for proof. Proof that I was not delusional, not distracted, not unrealistic. I was capable. And then it happened. My phone buzzed with a call. Mom. For a second, I just stared at the screen. She never called this late. Never during television hours. My heart started racing again, but this time for a different reason. I answered. Maya? Her voice sounded different. Not critical, not controlled, shaken. Were you just on TV? I swallowed. Yes, silence. I could hear the television in the background. The replay of my own voice faintly echoing through our living room. My father's voice came through next, distant but clear. Is that really her? My mother spoke again, softer this time. Why didn't you tell us? I almost laughed. Not out of disrespect, out of irony. For years, I had tried to tell them smaller things. They were too busy correcting me to listen. And now the world had announced me so loudly that they couldn't miss it. I wanted to be sure, I said calmly. Sure of what? She asked. Sure that it was real. There was another pause. This one felt heavier. Your uncle just called, she continued. Everyone is talking about you. Everyone. The same relatives who once asked about my marks were now asking about my startup. My father finally spoke directly to me. You did well. 3 words. Simple. Short. But I had waited years to hear something like that, without a but attached to it. No correction followed. No comparison. Just acknowledgement. After the call ended, I sat there staring at my reflection in the dark phone screen. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel like I had defeated anyone. What I felt was powerful in a quieter way. The spotlight hadn't changed who I was. It had revealed who I had always been. The next morning, interviews began. Short clips for social media. Questions about my journey. Did your family always support you? One interviewer asked casually. I smiled politely. They taught me discipline, I said carefully. And in a way, it was true. Their constant pressure had sharpened me. Their doubt had forced me to be certain of myself. But I also knew something else now. Support and control are not the same. Guidance and dismissal are not the same. As the day went on, my following crossed a number I had once thought impossible. Messages poured in from young girls saying they saw themselves in me, that they felt invisible at home too, that they were scared to dream out loud. And suddenly this wasn't just personal anymore. My success wasn't just about proving something to my parents. It was about becoming visible for others who felt unseen. That night, back at the hotel, I finally allowed myself to cry. Not because I was hurt, not because I was angry, but because the weight I had carried for years felt lighter. The girl who once hesitated to share a report card had just negotiated equity on national television. The daughter who was told to be realistic had built something undeniable. And somewhere across the city, in a living room where I once felt invisible, my parents were watching replays of my voice filling a stage. They could no longer focus only on my failures. The world had spoken my name too loudly. When I returned home, nothing looked different. The same gate, the same cracked tile near the entrance, the same living room sofa with its slightly faded cushions. But everything felt different. Not because the house had changed. Because I had. My suitcase rolled behind me as I stepped inside. My mother was standing near the dining table. My father was seated on the couch. The television was off, but I could see the remote placed carefully beside him, as if it had been used more than usual. For a second, no one spoke. It felt like the air was adjusting to a new reality. Then my mother walked toward me. She didn't inspect me. She didn't ask about my marks or my schedule. She simply looked at me. Really looked at me. You look tired, she said softly. It was the gentlest observation she had ever made about me. I nodded. It was a long week. My father stood up slowly. I noticed something in his expression I had never seen before. Not authority, not expectation, uncertainty. Sit, he said, gesturing to the sofa. We sat facing each other like 3 people meeting for the first time. He cleared his throat. We watched everything. I didn't respond immediately. I wanted to hear what would come next. You spoke confidently, he continued. You answered every question. No criticism followed. No suggestion for improvement. Just facts, my mother added. Your aunt called 3 times. Everyone is proud. Proud. The word sounded fragile. like it wasn't used often in this house. I felt something shift inside me, but it wasn't satisfaction. It was clarity. For years, I had chased this moment in my imagination. I had thought when it finally arrived, I would feel victorious. Instead, I felt calm. "Why didn't you tell us?" my father asked again, this time without accusation. I looked at both of them carefully. This was the moment that mattered more than the television deal, more than the applause. Because every time I tried to share something smaller, I said evenly, it was dismissed. The room went silent. I wasn't shouting. I wasn't blaming. I was simply stating truth. When I ranked second, it wasn't enough. When I built something online, it was a distraction. When I was proud, I was told to be realistic. My mother's eyes lowered slightly. My father leaned back, absorbing my words. "I stopped telling you things because it hurt to feel invisible." My voice didn't break. That surprised even me. I had rehearsed anger for years. But now that I was finally speaking, anger wasn't necessary. They had seen me on that stage. They had heard strangers validate what they once minimized. My father rubbed his hands together slowly. "We were trying to prepare you for the real world," he said. I nodded. I understand. But the real world also requires belief, and I had to find that alone. My mother looked at me then, her expression softer than I had ever seen it. "We were scared," she admitted quietly. "Scared that you would fail. Scared that people would judge. Scared that you would get hurt." I almost smiled. "I was already scared," I said. But I still tried. The conversation didn't explode. It unfolded. Slowly. Honestly. For the first time, we weren't discussing my shortcomings. We were discussing impact. My father asked about the investment deal, about equity, about future plans. And when I explained my strategy, he listened. Not as a critic, as someone trying to understand. That shift meant more than applause ever could. Over the next few days, something subtle changed in the house. My mother began asking about my meetings instead of my exam scores. My father watched interviews where I spoke and replayed certain parts. Once I caught him smiling slightly when I said, "Young people deserve opportunity." It wasn't dramatic. There were no emotional apologies or tears, but there was recognition, and recognition was what I had craved all along. Relatives began visiting, the same cousins I had been compared to now asked me for advice on building online profiles. The same aunt who once questioned my career choices now said, "You were always different." I didn't correct her. I didn't remind anyone of the past. Because revenge, I realized, is not about humiliation. It's about elevation. And I had elevated beyond the need to prove anything through bitterness. One evening, my father sat beside me while I worked on my laptop. "When is your next meeting?" he asked casually. "Tomorrow afternoon," I replied. He nodded. "If you need help reviewing documents, I can look at them." That offer, simple as it was, carried years of unspoken repair. I glanced at him and said, "I'd like that." For the first time, collaboration replaced correction. A week later, my mother placed a framed screenshot from the show on the living room shelf, my image under bright lights speaking with confidence. I noticed it immediately. She pretended not to see me looking at it, but I saw the pride in the careful way she dusted the frame. The spotlight had not changed my parents overnight, but it forced them to confront something undeniable. Their daughter was not failing. She was becoming. And maybe, just maybe, they had been too focused on fear to notice growth. One night, as we ate dinner, my father said something that settled deeply in my chest. "You don't have to be perfect," he said quietly. "Just keep building." It was the opposite of everything I had heard growing up. And in that moment, I understood something powerful. The spotlight didn't just find me. It revealed the cracks in the expectations that once confined me. I had stepped onto that stage alone, but I walked back into this house stronger, clearer, unshaken. I no longer needed their approval to move forward. But having their acknowledgement felt like healing. I am Maya. I am 20 years old. I was once the girl whose success was measured by what she lacked. Now I am the woman who measures herself by what she builds. And the brightest spotlight I ever stood under was not the one on television. It was the one that finally made my parents see me. If my story touched you, if you've ever felt unseen, underestimated, or dismissed, remember this. Sometimes the loudest revenge is quiet success. Turn your pain into power, build in silence, and let your results speak so loudly that no one can ignore you. Subscribe to this channel for more dramatic revenge stories where strength rises, betrayal burns, and the spotlight always finds the one who refused to give up.